you're in a meeting, you're getting a bad review. And if you don't have the attention network developed, you start to ruminate about, oh my gosh, you've lost the connection with the person who's giving you this review, and you're maybe not asking the right questions you could be. If your emotions are not in control, you might act out in anger, like, no, that's not me, because you didn't take the time to develop your emotional regulation skills, so you're reacting instead of responding.
Welcome, everybody. Hi, friends. I'm Scott Shute, and we're here at changingwork.org, where we're trying to change work from the inside out. And today I am joined by Cory Smith. Cory, welcome and good morning.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, great to be here. And hello, everyone. Happy to be with you all.
Excellent. Today we're talking about cultivating resilience in a chaotic world. And let me introduce Cory a little bit. Cory is the co-founder and CEO of Wisdom Labs, which is a company that delivers scalable solutions for mental, emotional, and social well-being in the workplace. And previously, before that, he was CEO and founder of a number of different startups in this space. And so, again, welcome. We're so glad to have you and be talking about resilience. Cory and I had the chance to go to a conference earlier this week that was about a combination of wisdom and AI in the world. And it painted a picture, we talked about what the future of work was, what the future of life was. And there's a lot of change going on in the world. So if we paint this picture of AI is coming and it's going to create change, and there's, already we were in this place where in the workplace, change was all around us with work from home or hybrid work. And then you have, the global changes and things going on in the world. So it occurs to me that resilience is such a critical part of what we need to do. But maybe, Cory, I know you're in this work. Can you talk more about why resilience is so important and what is it?
Yeah, I think you framed it really well. There is, by all indications, so much ongoing change. It doesn't seem to be slowing down in any way. The conference we were at was around wisdom and AI, and that's one of the big changes that's happening. We also had a talk with Tristan Harris, who is looking at the attention economy and helped produce the social dilemma. You look at all these different combinations of things that are going on that are coming at us. So let's start with that first, attention economy. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of companies that are vying for our attention all of the time. And it'll distract us here, distract us there. We see the issues with that. It's not just young kids, it's all of us that are being targeted. And then when we add on the changes that are coming with AI, robotics, bioengineering, all these other aspects, we're in for a changing world for sure. And a world that's trying to take us away from our focus and our attention simultaneously. And so building resiliency in that way and building the skills of mental, emotional, and social well-being are really critical to help guard against what's currently happening and prepare and be ready for those changes that inevitably come, a lot of which will not be with any of these new technologies. They'll just be with knocks that you get throughout life, which are natural. It could be health related, could be work related, could be any other thing. So I think the position is how do you actually start to put yourself in a really good position for what we know is the inevitable upcoming changes in life and in the workplace. So sure. You asked, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, let's talk about the stakes of this, right? As individuals. We kind of talk about change and we kind of talk about attention, but let's break it down. What's the impact? What's the impact to us if we're distracted or we're not, focused on the things we want to focus on?
Yeah, you can look at it a lot of different ways. The context that we're in right now is what's the work, changing work, right? So, let's start with the workplace and a large level. Stress, it creates a lot of stress if we don't have the skills to deal with resilience, to be resilient. If we don't have the focus, for instance, the emotional regulation skills, all those critical skills that you probably didn't learn in school, or if you did, just a little bit. So these are ones we have to kind of learn about and cultivate ourselves. So the cost of stress at work is around between 3 and $500 billion estimated a year. We have one and I think it's three executives and employees are struggling with fatigue or poor mental health, a self-report, and loneliness is on the rise. So that's an issue as well. So these kind of combination of factors that are going on are all the things that from a business perspective. And then, that's a business perspective. And so for organizations, it's important to start to address these. And there are a lot of actions to try to mitigate these in the workplace, but those are some of the business costs. But I think, I think about this on a personal level. It's really about how do we alleviate suffering, and is there a way to help people that are suffering with chronic stress, worry, anxiety, coming close to burnout, these types of things that if you don't tend to your mental, emotional, and social well-being can either deteriorate, especially with a growing chaotic world of change, it'll start to drain your battery. So when you do get hit with the inevitable thing, you're not set. So I think I like it come back to an individual perspective and how can we build the skills to alleviate that suffering or mitigate it in whatever way we can.
I think that's it right there when we talk about the stakes, right? So for each one of us, are we living the life we really want to? Are we living in a life of overwhelm or anxiety or stress? Or are we living the life of what we really want? So I'm curious, Cory, I know that, you're founder and CEO of Wisdom Labs. I think this company's been around for 10 years, but I feel like you've always been in positions or in companies that are trying to make positive change in the world. And maybe tell us a little bit about your story. Like, why is this important to you? How did you get into this work, this kind of work of service versus the traditional Silicon Valley work?
It has been a theme for my entire career to work on something that's positive for people on the planet, if you really break it down. And I got into this part of work because after running my own startups and having success, I burned out personally. So I knew I needed these skills personally in order to grow and to be effective. And, that's what, here we are, many years later, we have this business. And I think resiliency is a key skill, but we also develop these skills of mindfulness, compassion within the workplace. But prior to this business, I've started a number of different businesses that kind of get more to the conscious business side of things. Changing work is about conscious business leaders. And we think about what is a conscious business leader and what is conscious business. And that's a fun one to kind of break down. And when I kind of go back through my career, it's always been working with people who are conscious leaders, working in conscious business, because I started early in my career with this idea, if you can align something around purpose and passion, some things that, we don't all have the luxury to do this. So I want to just say that it's not a luxury. It's a luxury to be able to start a business around something you want, but we all have our own purpose, our own passion, so we can cultivate that in whatever frame we like. And then in an entrepreneurial context, what is it that the world needs and what am I good at bringing to bear? And then the third piece of that is what's positive for people on the planet? How can I use this in a way that's going to be positive for people on the planet? And if you can align those three things, it's a really great way to go through the world. And to bring it back to resiliency, when going gets tough, you want to be inspired in your work and in your service. And service gives a lot of, give you a lot of energy because of what we just talked about. You're helping people. And that gives you a lot of energy. It gets you up in the morning, gets you moving. And so all my businesses, whether it was at the Impact Hub, where I was the CEO, and we were kind of at exactly the time that WeWork started, I think 2010, 2011, I was a CEO of an organization called Impact Hub, which was the one thing that I implemented there as a CEO is it was a 10,000 square foot shared workspace. And I asked, the only criteria for getting in was that you're working on something that's positive for people and the planet. And that created an environment where all the people in that workspace that are all working together were more or less on the same team. And it grew. We ended up going to 20,000 square foot shared workspace. So for a number of years, I was immersed and surrounded by conscious business leaders, people that were working on this and simultaneously working with an organization called SOCAP, the Social Capital Markets Conference, and impact investing and social entrepreneurship, and the marrying of those is what we see as kind of the foundation of what conscious business and conscious leadership is all about. And to bring it back to kind of the work that we're doing, and I know that we share an interest in, when we think about conscious business, we also think about what is conscious or unconscious. You're wanting to be conscious. And in order to do that, you need the skills to watch your thoughts through mindfulness and compassion skills and those sort of things, which is the foundation of what we build at Wisdom Labs. But I think a foundational element for building resiliency. You start with the brain networks that you can really have a change with, which might be, the attention networks, the emotion regulation networks, the pro-sociality networks. How we know that we can have positive change in neuronal change in the brains, neuroplasticity, but we need to develop those brain networks. And then what are the skills? What's the research shown that can actually make positive change in these areas? And that gets us kind of back to where we originally were in this conversation about resilience in a chaotic world. How do you actually develop these skills? What are the skills that are important to be developed? And,
Sure.
And, yeah.
I think this is a good, so we've set it up. Here's why it's important. It's essentially at the root of it is our happiness, is our ability to feel at ease in life. And in the workplace, that means we're going to have better results. We're going to be more aware of each other. We're going to be able to deal with hard things. And I appreciate that, you've been doing this work for a long time. And so each of us has this motivation to make this happen. But let's get into it. You mentioned some of these changes that happen in our brains and in our awareness. If somebody says, all right, great, I want more of this, what do they do? What are some of the practices that they actually do to build resilience?
Yeah, so let's go through this network. So the attention network is all about mindfulness. So that's not a new term for most of us. How do you cultivate mindfulness? I think one of the formulas that we've found has been effective in that regard is first give the science, what's going on with any kind of practice that you put forward, especially in the workplace. And then a practice. So mindfulness practice, meditation, any number of mindfulness practices in the attention network help grow that network. So you'll be familiar with so many of them, whether it's a breathing exercise, a mindfulness exercise. That's one that will really help. Those are some skills that will really help develop that attention network. Then you have your emotional regulation network. We're emotional beings, understanding, your own emotions, how to regulate your emotions, how to pause, reflect before you respond instead of react, and not let the emotion take you over. And the way we bring that forward with Wisdom Labs is we have an app called Wise at Work, it's like Calm or Headspace, but built for the workplace, for the ground up. And so, we're showing the science, and then we're giving the practices. So these are the areas. And then in the pro-social area around resiliency, it's especially important. And the research just keeps pointing back that we're social creatures. When we're up against something that's a knock in our lives, or something that's really challenging our resilience and our what's going on with us, developing pro-social skills, reaching out to people that can help with you, connecting with others is one of the best things that you can possibly do in order to be resilient. And there's been so much research coming out recently about the importance of that skill specifically. And maybe partially because of the context of COVID, when we didn't have access to that and it was all via Zoom and it wasn't in person so much. Not that you can't get it from that place, but you get. So that's the third one, and those are just a few areas that I think could be helpful, and the areas to probably pay attention to most closely.
Beautiful. That last one is near and dear to my heart. We have we've created this community in changing work, and I really appreciate going every morning or afternoon and kind of just interacting with my friends, my colleagues. And I think it helps with this idea that we have this pandemic of loneliness, right?
Yeah.
When we're all separated, we're all, are in our home offices, or many of us are, that loneliness can be a real killer. And so could you talk about the difference, the role of loneliness or connection in resilience itself? Like, why does this work?
Well, first, I think it's, on the loneliness side, Vivek Murthy's work around that, which is coming up, which you can check. He's our Surgeon General. If you want to learn a little bit about what is going on with loneliness and the issues that you just pointed out and how widespread it is, I would search some of his most recent talks because he's been speaking a lot about it. It's also equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day in its health risks. So if you could declare yourself lonely, there are a lot of health risks to you as well. And I love that you have, Changing Work is a community. We also have Wise at Work communities, which allows people to learn and practice together. We were doing it in person, and we do it over Zoom now, more likely, in more cases than not. But it is a critical skill to develop. And a lot of people will feel like, well, maybe I don't have those connections with my family. Maybe I'm a little bit isolated. There's ways to go about it just in terms of walking down to your local coffee shop and connecting and saying hi or connect. These are called loose ties. So you can develop these loose ties throughout your people that you encounter throughout your day, being able to interact with them in even a small way, or help them, or send them good wishes, even silently, is a way to kind of cultivate that social connection, even if you're not interacting with someone. But the most critical is, who do I have in my network, whether it's family, friends, or larger communities like Changing Work, that I can connect with, and both in person and online, and asking yourself, does this feeding me? Do I feel slightly better from that? Am I elevated slightly from having that interaction? Am I glad I did that? It was a little bit difficult for people that don't naturally do it, but am I glad I did that? And it's really critical that you do take those steps because of all the research out there about if you don't, and the health risks.
It occurs to me that we have to be really intentional about building relationships, or even spending time on what you noticed or what you called pro-social behavior. And I'm wondering, for me, nothing happens unless it's in my calendar oftentimes. And so I will schedule a calendar entry for people's birthdays, or I'll schedule a calendar entry to just spend time reaching out to my friends that I want to cultivate those relationships. I'm wondering if you have any good life hacks or systems to put in place to help us be more pro-social.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just take one that I just implemented with my family that is kicking off this Sunday, which is, I've been reading a lot of the research on the importance of these social networks, and I was looking no further than my own family, who's spread out across the country. I don't have my family here close by, so a very small thing. We're starting every Sunday, first Sunday of every month. Family gets together. We have a Zoom conference, and we start to connect. And I put a few prompts there for us to do. But we aren't going to need that. We love hanging out with each other, but we don't do it quite enough. And it's so simple. We're making it so that it can expand out to the kids. It's not just the adults. It's people that want to join in and kind of learn a little bit about what's going on, what's important to people. Another example, just very minor example. Yesterday, I arranged a meeting with a friend of mine I hadn't seen for a while. We met for coffee, and I didn't need anything. I didn't want anything, but I just wanted to connect. He wanted to connect. We met for, I think it was 30, 40 minutes at the very most, but we both felt great after that. And so those are so simple. These things can be really simple. Take the time. And maybe this is for what a lot of people might need in order just to feel like, oh, I need to make the time. It's not only good for me and I feel good about it, but it actually is really good for my resiliency, my health, and all the things that are going to make me effective at work.
I love that. I love that. Switching gears a little bit, I know that some people have a sensitivity to this word resiliency in the workplace, meaning, sometimes a company will offer resilience training, but then maybe the environment is not great. So there becomes this cynicism like, oh, you're putting all this challenge, on me. So how should we think about that in the world of, resiliency training and trying to boost our overall resilience?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's something to pay attention to, and this was kind of in the early days of mindfulness. There was a thing called mindfulness, and how do we guard against that? And that's something that we at Wisdom Labs took seriously kind of from the beginning 10 years ago, and reached out to our advisors and people that are on our app, Tara Brock and Jack Cornfield, and both of them separately made one suggestion that you always yoke mindfulness with compassion if you're going to drop it into the workplace. Because the question we had to them was, how do we think this is good intention, but then it gets turned on itself? And so, at least for what we're doing, we look for something that has mindfulness and compassion, the compassion for others, but also self-compassion embedded in it. The other thing I would say about resiliency within the workplace, it may seem like, and it may be actually true, that it's good. It is good for the company, because if people aren't resilient, they're not going to be as productive. But in the backdrop of everything that we just discussed, resiliency on an individual level is a key skill. It's speaking of the AI thing, which is going to be a massive change coming up. I think we're in this kind of what I call the yabba dabba do moment. Before the car takes off, you see Fred Flintstone kind of moving and nothing's happening, and then the car takes off. I feel like we're in that moment right now where AI is a lot of talk, but it hasn't really hit yet. It hasn't, where it's out there and people are playing with it, but it hasn't had the worldwide changes that we're about to have. So back to an individual, I would soak up all the resilience training you can get and start to learn the skills individually, because no matter what company you're at or matter what situation you're at, it's going to continue to change. It's going to continue to morph. You're going to have life knock you here and there, no matter what you do. And you want to be able to bounce back better when you have something that's a real issue, whether it's a health scare or whether it's something at work or even minor things, such as a bad work review. And so if you're, as an example like that, you're in a meeting, you're getting a bad review. And if you don't have the attention network developed, you start to ruminate about, oh my gosh, I'm going to start this, and you've lost the connection with the person who's giving you this review, and you're maybe not asking the right questions you could be. If your emotions are not in control, you might act out in anger, like, no, that's not me, because you didn't take the time to develop your emotional regulation skills, so you're reacting instead of responding. And then all those other things around. Let's take it to another level, the pro-social. You get this bad news, and then the pro-social, who do you reach out to in your network that can help you get on track really quickly? Just a small example of things that you can be doing in a big situation, that or even a small situation like a bad, or not an entirely bad, but a slightly bad review.
Yeah. For me, it feels like it's about taking responsibility, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
If the company offers it, the easiest thing in the world to be is a cynic, right? And to say, oh, they're just offering it so they can, give us more work so we can work harder.
Yeah.
But for me, I think about it as, how do I develop myself? How do we go further? One of the really interesting things from the conference we were at earlier, this woman researcher was talking about customers who were using an AI chatbot, essentially. And they were talking about, and these were real quotes from customers, the customers preferred talking to this chatbot because they didn't have to have social anxiety. They didn't have to have arguments, that humans often let them down. And essentially, if anybody saw the movie Her, It was about these essentially chatbots that become us. And so it occurred to me that we could find ourselves in this AI world where we lose track of our ability to deal with others, and we're hiding, in some cases, from the messy relationships that we have as humans. But in doing so, we're actually losing out on the learning opportunities, right? And sometimes it's the challenge that actually makes us stronger, makes us a better person. So I wonder, what you think about the world. I mean, there's plenty of challenges in the world, but what's the benefit of going through challenge and the resiliency that we deal with?
Yeah, it's like, if you can liken it to working out, where you have resistance, you work out enough that you're tearing, you're actually you have the damage that happens, but then you get the building afterwards. It's very similar in that way with life challenges and building your resiliency. You're going to have these things that come up. You don't want to hide from them. You want to walk. You're not trying to invite them. They're going to arise no matter what. But putting yourselves in these situations, and so it is important to develop, to when you're hit, to look at it as, okay, I might need a moment to gather myself. It could be a really big thing. It's a long, protracted situation, but how can I build my skills and meet this and have a mindset? Because a lot of this is mindset about difficulties are part of life, and they're here to help us grow. You think of any time that you've had really big growth, it's probably because you had a big challenge that you overcame. And then that is very similar, as I mentioned, as working out and building muscle. You challenged your muscle, it tore, it had all the different transformations, and it grew. And we're similar that way, and it's built in. And I was also taken by that conversation. I think it was Sherry Turkle who had a conversation about the coming age of AI chatbots. And I know that Yuval Harari has been talking about this and saying the first wave of digital tools was about the attention economy, which we just discussed, about getting your attention. This next wave of AI tools is about intimacy. And so it's about cultivating that intimacy, and people want it. And this Sherry Turkle, if you want to look up her work, I think is very elegant on talking about the issue. That the way that I kind of looked at it was, you can have that and it feels good, but it's like cotton candy. You can get some skills, but it also has the potential to, as you say, create less and less friction, which we actually need. There is this fine balance between enough stress and not in your system, and not overwhelm chronic stress. So there's a balance there.
Yeah, there's an interesting, also in the world of AI, they were training AIs and discovered that there's an exact formula for growth, and it required about 16% failure. So, and they extrapolated, it's like, well, think about life. In other words, if we're going to grow, we need about 16% of failure in our life for the optimum fastest growth possible, right? If you have too much failure, then you just get discouraged. But if you don't have any failure, then you don't learn. Yeah. So I think that's really fascinating too.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, I agree with that. And I would, when you were saying that, I don't know about you, but I would say for my own self, that's a growth area of, do I have 16% over 100 days, let's say, 16 of those days where there's failure. I'm not saying that there's something that comes in that's, knocking you, or, life skill. It's like, did you push yourself to a place where you actually reached a failure point 16 of those 100 days, or whatever kind of metric you wanted to lay out there? I don't think I do. As an entrepreneur, I'm always kind of pushing the envelope, but I think that's a growth edge, and an edge for probably most of us. What about yourself? Do you feel like you have? Do you feel like you're pushing and failing?
It's
enough?
A good question. I definitely don't have happiness 100% of the time, or feel like I'm winning 100% of the time. So I won't get the name exactly right, but the guy who did all the work on flow state, Mihail Csikszentmihalyi or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that. He talks about the flow channel, and there's this, to stay in the flow channel. If we have things too easy, we get bored. If we have things too hard, then we retract. And so by building our ability to fail, building our ability to deal with hard things, it increases the size of this flow channel, meaning it increases the amount of time we're in the flow state, which I think is really beautiful. There's a question I want to get to. We have some folks that are with us live that have some questions in the chat. This one's from Amy. And she says, asking people to do self-reflection or become more self-aware and capable of self-compassion can trigger deep emotional responses in people who are new to this work. And at the core, we're asking people to heal. So what can or should companies do when we are talking about the segment of people who are wrapped in a defensive layer to protect themselves from deep trauma or emotional wounds? These people may have a harder time being asked to open this side of themselves since it opens the wound.
I won't talk about capital T trauma, more small trauma. Now, I would want to leave the capital T trauma to the therapist and the doctors on the spectrum. I think about mental, emotional, and social well-being as a spectrum, and green, yellow, red. On the red zone, there are people that have been traumatized in a way that they really need a specialist, a therapist, a doctor, somebody to help them adjust to this. So let's talk about the people that are in the green and yellow zone a bit more, that have maybe something that they're not looking at, but they, through the process of mindfulness, this starts to come up. And I think mindfulness is a great practice for checking in with yourself, noticing your thoughts. And when people start to practice meditation or let's say meditation in this case, and start noticing their thoughts, it can actually have bigger issues than when they started, because now they're noticing all these thoughts that are flowing through their head, and they're like, wow, I didn't, and then the longer you have a practice, the more these embedded things that you've been repressing, small or big trauma, whatever it comes up, start to rise up. But to me, that is a healthy process. Again, if it gets to be too unhealthy, then you need to seek out the therapist if you're not able to deal. But being able to not only watch your thoughts, but then to learn about your emotions and what they're about, what they're trying to tell you, and what the information is there that you can take advantage of when they do come up. If they're not overly overwhelming, that can be really, really helpful to start to surface those and let them flow through. They're trapped, and they need to flow through. Optimally, they would flow through, you would process them, and then you would be free for the next set of issues that come through. What happens is a lot of times they get compacted. So I think mindfulness and meditation, some people won't want meditation. They don't like to do meditation. There's all kinds of different things. Even deep breathing is very helpful in this regard. So yeah, there's a few things I'd say on that topic.
Another person asked, what are basic things that we can do to build our resilience? And, here I'd like to talk about the Wise at Work app that you and the team at Wisdom Labs have put together. Wise at Work is an app for those of us that are in the work environment. And all of these things are designed to help build resilience. And maybe, Cory, you could talk about some of your favorite practices or some of the favorite things that you find within the app, and maybe give us a little mini tour of your favorite pieces.
Yeah, I would say the thing that I find that is a really nice superpower that you don't have to even meditate or learn to meditate, and you're dealing with stress, which is, let's say, that's probably one of the number one things people in the workplace are dealing with is chronic stress or a big stressful moment that they want to be able to manage, or they're in a meeting and something's spiking in them and they don't have time to start to meditate or do whatever is necessary. And this skill is so simple that it gets overlooked, I think. where when you are in a stressful situation and it's in real time, the best possible thing I feel you can do is to take a deep diaphragmatic breath and filling your your lungs and your diaphragm from the bottom up, and then a slow exhale, even a slower exhale from the top down. It's like filling a glass. It starts at the top and it goes down, and then and so it's a great thing to do. One, you have to breathe anyway. Two, it downregulates your parasympathetic nervous system, which then sends a response to your system that everything is okay and that you can actually relax. And it's a beautiful hack, but it's also just a superpower skill that you can use over and over and over again. And I love that skill. And it also provides a basis for, building other skills on top of, as a base skill, just as one. Scott, I mean, you and I have been practicing mindfulness for a long time. I would ask the same question back to you. I could talk about things on the app, but I'll say one thing about the app. It is built for the workplace, for the ground up. It's mental, emotional, and social well-being. And it's with some of the top neuroscientists, wisdom leaders, conscious business leaders, diversity and inclusion experts. So I love that, and I find a lot of value out of it. And so if people want to check out the app, they can do it. Why does it work? You can check us out at Wisdom Labs. And for within the work context, we do these challenges once a month, about every 4 or 5 months, and they're free for companies that are 100 people or more. So that's one way to get involved with it. But I would throw the question back to you, Scott, and say,
Sure.
What are some of your favorite practices for either mindfulness or dealing with stress, worry, anxiety?
Sure. I love the taking a deep breath. One of my favorites is asking the question, what else is true? Right? We get so fixated on what's wrong. I call it like pothole management. There can be 1,000 miles of perfect road and there's one pothole, and where does our attention go? And we end up, inside this pothole, spinning and spinning and spinning. And so I find for me, what's helpful is to stop whenever I'm feeling stressed or anxious and say, okay, what else is true? Like maybe I'm watching the news and I get all upset. What else is true? Well, what else is true is, look, there's birthdays and weddings and good stuff happening as well beyond the stuff that's on the news. Or if I'm thinking about one of my relationships and it's not going very well, what else is true? I think about all the perhaps the other relationships that are going well, or even other parts of that problematic relationship that are going well. And so for me, it's not about ignoring what's hard. It's broadening the scope. And for me, this is true mindfulness, to see 360 degrees without judgment, which in a similar way allows my nervous system to calm down, allows me to see things in a bigger point of view. And if I focus on the light, it gives me more strength to deal with the dark.
I love that.
All right. Cory, thank you so much for being here. If folks want to know more about the work that you and your team are doing, like where do they find you? What other things are you doing in the world?
Yeah, so they can find us at wisdomlabs.com. And I'm Cory at Wisdom Labs if there's someone that wants to reach out directly. Yeah, no, it's been a real pleasure. And Scott, I would just say, I love what you're doing with changing work. I've seen, it's just the idea behind it to build community, of bringing people together to learn and practice these important skills, to be in community, to support each other, to learn about all the different facets of work, with a kind of a social mission behind it, and not kind of, but really behind it, which is, how do we change the work for good? How do we develop our best selves? And I see that inherent in all the work you've been doing for so long, and I see it really prominently right here. So I want to, just say what a great thing you're you're doing here, and may it be a benefit to all the people who are part of it, and ripple out into the world, because that's how the real change will happen. And I love what you're up to.
Well, thanks very much. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the work you're doing in our partnership together. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Cory, once again for joining and the work that you do in the world. And if you want to find us, we're at changingwork.org. Come join the fun. Until then, until next time, have a beautiful day, and go out there and be ambassadors for compassion.